everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be filming a book haul for you. This is probably a culmination of books from like summer to about now, I would say. Apologies if you hear drilling in the background. I feel like this has been going on for 2 weeks now because I did mention it in a video a while back. But I'm not using my microphone today because it's broken, I think. So hopefully you won't actually be able to pick up too much of the background noise. But without further ado, let us get into the book haul. So some of these books you probably would have already seen on my channel, but hey, it's a book haul. We're just going to be hauling books and I'll be telling you about them, and if I have reviewed them in any videos so far, I will link you to those videos. The first book I'm going to speak about is Butter Honey Pig Bread by Francesca. I'm not sure how to pronounce her surname, so I'm not going to, but it is a Nigerian surname. I actually ended up picking this up because I read another book that is published by Arsenal Pulp Press, which is the publisher that publishes this. I enjoyed that book so much and thought like it was quite dark and it was very much set in Canada, and I just wanted to see what other books they published, and I came across this, and this really caught my eye because it also focused on food, and I just love books that centre around food. This book I have already read, so it's always hard for me when I do a book haul to talk about a book that I have already read because I'm very tempted to just review the book, but I will be doing a video talking about this book, so hopefully I will be able to link that. I'm not sure which one of those will go up first. But this book follows two sisters, and they grew up in Nigeria, and one ends up in Canada and the other also ends up in Canada, but they're in different parts of Canada. And essentially what this book about is a trauma that happened in their life when they were younger. They are twins, and it's only them and their mother essentially that they grew up with. Their dad died when they were about 7 or so. And from that time, like I said, there was some trauma that happened to one of the twins that really sort of separated them. They were so close before, and really they come back to Nigeria. I'm not really sure why they come back to Nigeria. They come back to like visit their mum, and it's basically about managing that trauma and managing that situation and how they relate to each other and what has happened and transpired in their lives since then. I really love this book. One of the characters, I think it's Tai, she focuses a lot on, oh my god, that noise! One of the daughters, Tai, focuses a lot on food, and so in the beginning you really get all these scenes of her making different things, and it's talking about the ingredients in them, how she's making them, and she also goes to culinary school, so there's also a bit in there about her going to school and learning those different things. So I really love that food element of it, but definitely this book is definitely centering around trauma. It's something that happens to them when they were little, and I would definitely say trigger warnings for this book. There's trigger warnings in here for sexual assault, for rape. None of this really is on page, but also kind of on page. And yes, it does get quite dark in places, and I was talking about this obviously in my review, but I just wanted to give those trigger warnings because I wish I had them trigger warnings. Not gonna lie, the end of drilling is doing my head in, but I don't actually think you can hear it on, like, just because of this microphone. It's just so echoey, the inbuilt microphone of the camera, and it's just so echoey that I don't actually think you can hear much of me talking. The next book is Shine Darling by Ella Fries. I think I picked this up because Jen Campbell might have spoken about it. I'm not too sure, but it was in my Amazon basket for the longest time, and then I just I wanted to buy a poetry collection. So this collection was shortlisted for the T.S. Eliot Prize and then shortlisted for the Forward Prize for Best First Collection, which is why I think that I got the recommendation from Jen, because she talks a lot about the Forward Prize winners and things like that. So this is Ella's debut collection, and I think I'll read you the blurb more about it because I didn't actually really enjoy the poetry collection that much. So I want to give you a taste of what it's supposed to be like. It says it's her debut collection of wry, vivid poems whose power lies in their intimacy. They are insistent as they are circumspect, drawing close to the reader's ear and bringing them into confidence. The engine of Shine Darling is one of strength and fortitude and comfort in confronting and surviving the world of a lifted chin audacity. Fraser's work is world-weathered rather than world-weary, delighted by service stations fucking on bins in Cornwall, in constant communion with the moon. It lives for the powerful power play of people, of the pull of the sea and the smoky air, and tangled underbrush where land ends. Okay, so I don't actually think this blurb gives you an indication that much of what it's about. I really love like blurbs like this. I think this is blurbed so nicely. There is another book that I think might be coming up in this, I also think has a fantastic blurb. I think Frizz is from Cornwall, so this has a lot of, I think a lot of people who are from like that sort of part of the world really enjoy it, because I think it has a lot of dialect, or like it's heavily influenced by where she came from. So it's got that, like it can be quite local, and if you've got that proximity to that area, I think this book can feel quite nice. I was literally about to go and review and be like, for me, this didn't feel whatever. It's a collection of poems. It's definitely a collection of poems that talk about like being a teenager and like the bit about fucking in Cornwall, like literally a poem called Fucking in Cornwall. And yeah, it's about being a young person. It's about someone going through life. It's really hard for me, I think, to tell really what this is about, because I find it quite abstract, and therefore I'm not actually able to determine sometimes when I'm reading them what they are about. Therefore it's hard for me to be like, this is what this is about. But I do very much think it is about coming of age as a girl in Cornwall in England. The next book I'm going to speak about is We Have Always Been Here by Samra Habib. I read this for non-fiction November, and yes, I picked it up specifically for that. This is a memoir, so it says here a queer Muslim memoir. This is about Samra's time growing up in Pakistan and then their move to Canada that her and her family made, and it is about sort of being ostracised for the sort of Muslims that they were in Pakistan, but then also coming to Canada, experiencing racism, but also then developing and finding out that she is queer, and how that sort of fit into her life and fit into her religion, as well as sort of how that fit as part of her family. She is the eldest daughter in her family, like the eldest anyway, but the eldest daughter. I think actually she has 2 younger sisters and then a younger brother. So yeah, this is a very interesting book, and I will do a wrap up for non-fiction November. Another book that I've also read, also for non-fiction November, is Written Within War, Stories, Poems and Articles of Hope by People in Custody and on Probation. I gave this 3 stars also, and we'll also talk about this in my non-fiction wrap up. But like it says on the front, this is a collection. So I think the prisoners in this is either people who are currently in prison, or are like again waiting to like leave prison or things like that on parole. And I think they entered a competition, and it's the sort of best of those competitions that got put into this book. And yeah, so we've got some essays in here, we've got poetry. I think we only really have like 1 poem in here, I could be wrong, but the fact that it says poems on the front would indicate 2 or more, but I don't know. I mean, I do know I've read it, but I can only remember 1 poem. And then we've got stories, and I don't know if all of it is non-fiction or fiction in terms of the stories, but they're very, very like invoking, and it really gives you food for thought. But like I said, if you want to hear more of my thoughts about this collection, then yeah, stay tuned for my non-fiction November wrap up. A book that I'm going to shamelessly plug is an anthology that I am part of. If you watch one of my reading vlogs, you already know that I had a piece of poem published in here, but this is also full of short stories as well as poems as well. And the theme for this anthology was maps and mapping, and the book is called Where We Find Ourselves. It's edited by Sandra a.ka and Layla Sumpton. It was a call for writers of colour to talk about like belonging and where they find themselves, just off the back of a lot of the Black Lives Matter movement that we've been having in 2020, and it's just talking about that sort of focus of home, or where you consider home, or the different places that you have considered home. And it's a really gorgeous anthology. I haven't fully read the whole thing from front to back, but I've read selected poems and selected stories, and they're all absolutely gorgeous. So if you are looking for something on the topic of identity or belonging or home, I would definitely recommend this. If you have noted the beer can here, it's because this noise is driving me crazy, like just pissing me off. So, another book that I'm going to speak to you about is Goldilocks by Laura Lamb. This book isn't actually mine. So, my boyfriend picked this up. There's another book in here that I will show you. And we were in Waterstones and he picked this up. And I kept thinking, I recognise this book so much. And someone has spoken about it on BookTube because I have it in my Goodreads to read. So, lucky for me. So this is a sci-fi novel, but it is very much a feminist spin. So it says here, despite increasing restrictions on the freedoms of women on Earth, Valerie Black is spearheading the first all-female mission to a planet in the Goldilocks zone, where conditions are just right for human habitation. It's humanity's last hope for survival, and Naomi, Valerie's surrogate daughter and ship's botanist, oh my god, stop that, has been waiting her whole life for an opportunity like this to step out of Valerie's shadow and really make a difference. But when things start going wrong on the ship, Naomi starts to suspect that someone on board is concealing a terrible secret and realises time for life on Earth may be running out faster than they feared. I don't know anything more about this book other than the blurb, because whilst I had it on my to-read list, I don't remember who was talking about it. My boyfriend read it, enjoyed it in parts. But yes, he is a seasoned sci-fi reader. So yeah, I'm really interested to get to this at some point. A book that I'm currently reading, which was actually lent to me, is Mara and Dan by Doris Lessing. So I feel like her and Ursula Le Guin are like, and Octavia E. Butler are like, you know, the women that people talk about in terms of sci-fi writing from like the 80s and all of that. So this was highly recommended to me by my boyfriend and then his parents as well. They were like, you have to start here. So I'm starting here. It's not usually the type of book that I read, and I am only halfway through it. But what this is about is two siblings, so Mara and Dan, not their original names. The book opens with them being basically like imprisoned. They're in a room and like they basically are really thirsty. What it is it's basically set in Africa, but it's called Ifrik. It's like, you know, as if like, you know, names have changed or whatever. That's such a terrible way of explaining it. But essentially civilization is experiencing a lot of the effects of global warming. There is no water, it doesn't rain that often, there is no like rivers dry up really quickly, and these two kids essentially like get taken away with these two adults who dump them at like this village which is like separate to the sort of people that they are essentially in terms of races, and they are raised by this old lady, and then like basically because of the effects of global warming, the village that they're in just has very little food, very little water, and those effects go on for like 15 years, and they move through time just basically trying to get to somewhere which is like, you know, the place where everything is okay. There's no severe effects of global warming. I think, let me see if I can actually read you a blurb that might be a better explanation than what I have just said here. Okay, a good read blurb for you. Thousands of years in the future, all the northern hemisphere is buried under the ice and snow of a new ice age. At the southern end of a large landmass called Ifrit, two children of the Mahondi people, 7-year-old Mara and her young brother Dan, are abducted from their home in the middle of the night. Raised as outsiders in a poor rural village, Mara and Dan learn to survive the hardships and dangers of life threatened as much by an unforgiving climate and menacing animals as by the hostile community of rock people. Eventually they join the great human migration north away from the drought that is turning the southern land to dust, and in search of a place with enough water and food to support human life. Travelling across the continent, the siblings enter cities rife with crime, power, struggles, and corruption, learning as much about human nature as about how societies function. With a clear-eyed vision of the human condition, Mara and Dan is imaginative fiction at best. And that's essentially it. They are migrating, joining people, fighting their way off into different societies, like once, you know, they get captured or things like that, and learning how the world works all around the world and sort of different traditions and cultures. It's not usually the type of book that I read, but I'm really enjoying it. I really, really enjoy her writing. Another book is Murder of a Lady, a Scottish Mystery by Anthony Wine. This is part of the British Library Crime Classics. I've wanted to read one of these British Crime Classics for a while. I feel like I literally have the last Poirot book to go, so I need something else to fill that hole of detective crime mysteries. And I thought I would try this. I don't know much about it. I was literally in Waterstones, and that's when we picked up Goldilocks and another book that I'll also talk about. And I was just trying to decide. It was deciding between a collection of short stories, which was actually about mysteries and books, like, well, murder and books. Like, it was like mystery for like bibliophiles or something like that. But then I ended up on this. And it says here, Duckland Castle was a gloomy, forbidding place in the Scottish Highlands. Late one night, the body of Mary Gregor, sister of Laird of Dunklan, is found in the castle. She's been stabbed to death in her bedroom. But the room is locked from within and the windows are barred. The only tiny clue to the culprit is a silverfish scale left on the floor next to Mary's body. One of the reasons why I picked this was because of the locked room mystery aspect. So I've been listening again to a lot of All About Agatha, which is a podcast dedicated to all of Agatha Christie's work. And in it, they talk a lot about, like, the sort of episodes that I've been listening is talking about some of Agatha Christie's locked room mysteries. I didn't even really know that they were a thing. So actually, obviously, I've read a couple of hers. The one in particular they were talking about was Hercule Poirot's Christmas, and there's also another one. And I thought it'd be nice to read more locked room mysteries. And then when we were in the bookshop, saw this, and I thought, okay, I'm going to pick this up. So it says here, Inspector Dundas is dispatched to Duckland to investigate the case. The Gregor family and the servants are quick, perhaps too quick, to explain that Mary was a kind and charitable woman. Dundas uncovers a more complex truth, and the cruel character of the dead woman continues to pervade the house after her death. Soon, further deaths, equally impossible, occur, and the atmosphere grows even darker. Superstitious locals believe that the fish creatures from the nearby waters are responsible, but lucky for Inspector Dundas, the gifted amateur sleuth Eustace Haley is on the scene and unravels a more logical solution to the most fiendish of plots. And yeah, and it says here the author wrote some of the best lockroom mysteries from the golden age of British crime fiction. So with you sort of what's the word? Gravitas like that, I was like, I'm definitely going to pick this book up. So I'm really excited to read this. It's kind of my first sort of delve out of the Agatha Christie world into sort of some other mysteries. A book that I read for Black History Month is Poor by Caleb Femi, and this is a poetry collection. I have already raved about this. This was a 5-star read. I love this. I will link you to the video where I speak about this book because it's absolutely a collection. But this is a collection about sort of his estate in Peckham, North Peckham estate. It talks about black boys, it just talks about, like, I won't say black boy joy, but not even that, it just talks about that as well as the real life circumstances that they have to deal with and sort of how that impacted their lives and the sort of things that he grew up seeing. There are also photos in here that Caleb has taken himself, which is so nice. But it says here, this is a North Peckham estate, a place where spring was told not by flowers but by fresh Air Jordans, where stop and searches happen weekly and where it is possible to walk for miles without ever touching the ground. In Poor, Caleb Femi has written an ode to a troubled yet enchanted world and to the black boys raised in it, and that's 100% what he's done. This is a stunning collection, and I definitely recommend that you pick this up. A poetry collection. This is Post-Colonial Love Poem by Natalie Diaz. Natalie is an Indigenous woman, so a lot of these poetry are based around her experiences of being Indigenous woman, what it's really like for like her people, and also that sort of clash with other Americans. There are some gorgeous poems in here, like it's an absolutely stunning collection. There were just some poems that was just a bit like, I don't understand what this is, even after I read it like 3 times. But this was shortlisted for the Forward Prize for Best Collection and the Poetry Book Society. I want to say that it also won the like Nobel Poetry, or at least it was shortlisted for it. It says here, Post-Colonial Love Poem is a thunderous river book of an anthem of desire against erasure. It demands that everybody carried in its pages bodies of language, land, suffering, brothers, enemies and lovers be touched and held. Let's see if we can get an actual bit more of what it's about. Natalie Diaz defies the conditions from which she writes, a nation whose creature predicted. Okay, that's not very helpful. That doesn't really tell you any more about what it's about, but there's definitely a lot of talking here about sort of like American museums and sort of the, I don't know, the way the American people have seen Indigenous people and how they've imprisoned them, how they've treated them. And then there's also aspects of love poems. There's also loads of poems in here about like her brother. I don't know if that's like made up or if like her brother just has loads of problems, but there's also poems in here that focus on her brother. So it's a real mixed bag, and I will talk more about it in my recent reads video. A book that was sent to me, which I have briefly spoken about, but I'll talk about it here because it's a book called which is Brown Girl in the Rain, Memoirs of a Brown Girl Living in Scotland. This is a memoir of Olukemi. It says here she's a highly successful body therapist who speaks and blogs on racism and transgender issues. Her first book, she tells of a momentous struggle growing up as a mixed-race child in Scotland. She describes in horrific, gut-wrenching detail the treatment she received at the hands of so-called good people of Scotland, acts of racism that continued into adulthood and wreaked havoc for her as a wife and a mother of 4 children. Her captivating story calls out unconscious racial bias even in her own family, but through the obvious pain and suffering, she still allows her sense of humour and her deep love for her husband and her children to shine through. Not content with just telling her story, she spells out her quest to tackle racism head on, but not with a call to arms. Forget anger and finger pointing and think more sit down chat with someone who understands. She lives and breathes compassion, not blame. Brown Girl in the Rain is a beautifully crafted and deeply personal memoir. Not only is it the ultimate message on how to put an end to racism, it is a true story for our times. I'm very much looking forward to reading this. Like, I just can't wait to read it with how beautiful it is. Very, very gorgeous. So yeah, thank you for sending me this. So it's getting very dark, so I upped the lighting a little bit. An anthology I want to talk about is Test Signal, Northern Anthology of New Writing. This is edited by Nathan Connolly, and I think it's a collaboration between Dead Ink and Bloomsbury. Yes, and what this is a collection of poems from like northern authors, so not poems, sorry, a collection of short stories. Maybe there are poems in here from authors in the north. And I don't actually know that there is one single theme running through this. I think they could basically write about anything. It says here on the back like what the titles are. So it says Bridges Over the Tyne, which is the Tyne is in Newcastle, Crumbling Coastline Influences online wells, asylum applications, pack train carriages, forgotten village social clubs, family in Nigeria, holidays in Greece, so much more. So it's definitely about the exploration, I think, of, I don't know if it's working class people, but it's definitely about showcasing a lot of writers from the north, and I think definitely all the themes are varied. So actually, yeah, sorry, those bits up here are not the titles of the stories or anything like that. I think those are just some of the things that it contains. So it does seem like quite a mixed bunch. They crowd-funded for this, so this was part of like a Kickstarter. And my name is actually in the back of the book because I was one of the people that like donated to the crowd fundraiser. Another book is In the Kitchen, Essays on Food and Life. I feel like I've spoken about this book a lot because I did it in my TBR video for Non-Fiction November, and then I did a reading vlog. But this is a collection of essays talking about food and the impacts that it's had on these people's lives. And it is a very, very lovely collection. It is a very varied collection, and because I've read it, I can give you a bit more insight into what it's about rather than just being like, it's a random collection of essays. But you know, there's for example, an aspect of someone who talks about being like a cookery book publisher, and then there's an essay of someone talking about like food and culture. I think it's Yemsi talking about, you know, dating a white boyfriend, and she's Nigerian, I think, so the sort of foods that she ate and how like it was commented on by him. So it really ranges in terms of its themes, and there are a bit of like cultural and media essays in there. And one of the writers in here is actually going to be the last book I talk about. She's also written the book that I'm going to speak about. So it's a very nice collection of essays, and I think it's very like well-rounded. So one of the final books I'm going to speak about, it's not actually the final book, is Tiny Moons, A Year of Eating in Shanghai by Nina Mingyang Powles. And she's also one of the contributors to essays on food and life in the kitchen one. This is about her time in Shanghai and the different foods she ate there, and yeah, preparing there and how that sort of affected her life, like going forward in terms of like when she prepares different foods, how it reminds her of these things. She writes really beautifully about like watching people prepare these foods. And they are told in short snippets, so they have like different chapters, but even within the chapters there's a sort of paragraph break or a sort of separation, and then she writes about different things. And I think actually if you're someone who likes food from China and things like that, and you have maybe eaten around different parts of China, you'll even enjoy this a little bit more, because she does really talk about the regional differences as you go into different parts of China. The final book I'm going to speak about, I'm sorry I can see that the light is really shining on this, is Do You Dream of Terror 2 by Temi O. And then the subtitle is How Far Would You Go for a Better World, or like a strapline. I wanted to read this for such a long time, so my boyfriend picked it up in the bookstore as well. I was like, I also want to read that. Great. I've seen so many people talk about this, and I've seen like sort of mixed reviews on it, basically, like good and bad reviews about this. As someone who has only like been delving their toe into the sci-fi world, I don't know what I'll think of it, but I think it's one of those softer introductions into sci-fi. So it says here, have you ever hoped you could leave everything behind? Have you ever dreamt of a better world? Can a dream sustain a lifetime? A century ago, an astronomer discovered an Earth-like planet orbiting a nearby star. She predicted that one day humans would travel there to build a utopia. Today, 10,000 astronauts are leaving everything behind to do so. 4 are veterans of the 20th century space race. 6 are teenagers who trained for this mission for most of their lives. It will take the team 23 years to reach Terra 2. 23 years locked in close quarters, 23 years with no one to rely on but each other. 23 years with no possible rescue should something go wrong, and something always goes wrong. So that's what that's about. I heard, though, that you spend just a lot of time with the main character. I could be misremembering, but I definitely remember listening to someone's video and they had quite a few criticisms of this book. But I'm here for it. I know Temio is a Nigerian. I don't know if she's Nigerian-American or British-Nigerian, but it's just nice to read some more sci-fi from writers of colour. So that is the book haul. Appreciate it's a bit long, but I think that will definitely be my final book haul for the year. So yeah, let me know if any of these books catch your fancy. And like I said, a lot of these books I have read, which is why I'm able to give you a lot more insight. But if I have read them and I have reviews about them, I will link them in the cards, but also down below in the description box. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll catch you in another one. Bye.